What's up guys, Brandon here from Gearist. Today we're going to be taking a look at the super hardcore trail busting Exodus 6.0 from SAUCONY. You know, here at Gearist we have the pretty good fortune of being able to pretty much have a shoe for any specific need that we could use. Any type of running, whether it's a track shoe that's meant for specifically track, whether it's a speed shoe, whether it's meant for tempo, something like that, or whether it's like this guy. SAUCONY has got this guy right here that is meant for trails, but what kind of trails? Well, let's take a deeper look. Right out of the box, the outsole of this guy stands out, and right now it stands out because it's freaking dirty, and that is because it is so damn toothy. Now in this guy it's using Vibram's XS Trek rubber. In places these lugs are over 6 millimeters deep, and just by looking at it you can tell that it's meant to take on some pretty serious terrain. The lugs on the shoe are laid out in two very distinct arrangements. You can first see this interior, the black area here, is laid out in kind of a series of triangular squares, if that makes any sense, square pods. And then you've got the perimeter, this orange here, that is these really deep and gnarly lugs. Also, what you can see up here in the forefoot are these three really well-defined flex grooves, which actually add something to the shoe and sit atop the EBO, or external bedrock outsole, which is this interior rock plate that you can see right there. Maybe it's a little bit of blue right in the middle there. The trails that I tried this guy on have been really widely varied. It's been some things that are groomers and some things that are super technical and off camber and what have you. Now on flat rocks, where a lot of things like this might tend to kind of slip a little bit because there's just not that flat traction and surface area grip, this actually did kind of well. It didn't do as well as some of the things that we've reviewed recently with some specialized climbing rubbers underfoot, but it did very well nonetheless. Now, once you got onto that really off camber and angular and ugly stuff, that is where this shoe excels. On anything that had an edge to it, both the internal and the perimeter lugs did a great job of really holding on there and really locking you onto that surface. Even in looser terrain, it felt good and dug down in there nicely. From a durability perspective, I'm quite impressed with the way this held up. Again, with about 45 miles on this, give or take, there is really not much apart from a couple nicks in the rubber. Really not much to say, and this includes actually about 5 miles of road on a day where the trail was too junked up to go run on the trail, but it did a very good job. Certainly no accelerated wear that I can see, and you know, Vibram rubber is known for its durability, and I can easily see, depending on your gait, of course, which greatly affects the durability of a shoe, easily getting 400 to 500 miles out of this guy. Now, one of the gripes that somebody might have with a shoe like this is that it's simply too much trail shoe, and that may be the case. You know, take into consideration what you're going to be running in. Where I live here in Colorado, where Gearist headquarters is, we can certainly get out and find any kind of trail we want, whether it's a groomed single track, just a kind of dirt road, or some really gnarly loose terrain, even rocking kind of mountain running, sky running type of material. You can find that. So if this is your only shoe, definitely take that into consideration. Is it going to be too much shoe for the kind of buffed out trails that you might be running? Maybe, but if you're going into something that's going to need a little bit more tread, a little more traction, this is going to be a good option for that. Moving into the midsole, while the outside of this guy is meant to really stand up to a lot of gnarly stuff, the midsole actually gave me a really solid, almost road running experience, believe it or not. Now, back over here, as I mentioned a second ago, that embedded EBO, or external bedrock outsole, that is kind of a rock plate that's actually pretty flexible. It's a semi-rigid foam that actually is going to protect your foot from any jabby things that might get in there. This is underlying the actual midsole foam, which has stack heights of 23.5 millimeters in the heel and 19.5 millimeters in the forefoot for a net drop of 4 millimeters. Now, I said a second ago that this had a road-like feel, and I stand by that. Now, the foam that they've used here is Saucony's Power Grip material. If I'm not mistaken, the next iteration of the shoe is actually going to have some of their Everrun foam in there as well. The foam offers a fairly cushy ride, but it's got good response, which actually conjured up images of some of Saucony's road offerings to me, to be very honest. And I never got the sense that it was trying to hide the ground for me, something I don't like. I like to be able to feel what's going on, and regardless of this beefy outsole, I definitely felt, thanks to that midsole material, exactly what was going on. While the stack of the shoe is not terribly high, especially once you take away those outsole lugs, the 6 millimeters there, the flexibility is a little bit compromised. So you can see that the front third of the shoe flexes, but then when we kind of get here, it does bend a little bit, but there's not really a whole ton of flex. Again, I understand that this is a trail crusher. It's not meant to really be super flexy or nimble, but it does a good job of actually defying that regardless of that inflexibility in the area. I just would like to see it kind of bumped sort of to the level of the Saucony Peregrine, which we saw and which we're about to review the next iteration of very soon. Let's move into the upper. The first thing that I'll let you know is that there is a Gore-Tex version of this shoe. We did not try the Gore-Tex version of this shoe. This is the straight up mesh version. The upper of this is another place where some of that road running heritage of Saucony's comes through. Now the first thing that I'll mention is the mesh with a very tight weave, which you can probably see there, actually is a single layer setup from what I can tell. There is the potential for some people who have kind of warm tending feet to actually feel a little bit warm in this. I didn't notice any particular warmth. I felt very comfortable. The breathability worked with my foot well. Just so you know that if you get the Gore-Tex version of this, that might be a little bit compromised, even though Gore is now coming out with some more breathable fabrics. One other thing that I really like is the inclusion of this kind of gator clip up here on the front, making this optimum for getting out into some snowy or slushier runs, and especially in that Gore-Tex version, for a gator clip to clip right on there, and then there's space right here in the midfoot for the strap to come underneath. The support structure of this guy is made entirely of Saucony's flex fill material, almost. Most of the supports that you can see back here are those bonded overlays, a little bit down here which are actually see-through that you can't see. The exception to that is right up here in the toe bumper, which is kind of a plastic or TPU material, and almost all the way around this rand right here, which is going to connect this upper down into the midsole, which is really going to increase the durability out of that area, which really fits the profile of the shoe. The amount of foam in the tongue is really solid. I enjoyed it, but the amount of foam around here in the collar is unnecessary. It thins out a little back here right at the Achilles insert, but right here on the sides it's just too much. I think it could be easily comfortable with the same amount of foam in the tongue kind of around the side here, maybe about half that density, but it's comfortable, don't get me wrong. I just think it's unnecessary and could probably shave a half an ounce or so. The final thing that I'll mention in this guy is the inclusion of Saucony's Pro Lock system, which we mentioned before in the Kinvara 5 and some other shoes, and that is this kind of almost secondary interior booty that kind of fits inside with this guy. It's not really like the ISO fit that we've seen in other Saucony models, but it definitely locks down on that midfoot. And when you're going into some more agility requiring areas, I actually feel like this really enhanced it by locking down that midfoot nicely. Again, the fit of the shoe is where some of Saucony's road heritage comes in. Now, first in terms of sizing, I felt like my size 11s were spot on. So if you're in whatever size you're in a Kinvara or something like that, this should fit right according to that. Now, into the heel, the fit here is very interesting for me. While I felt very secure with a nice toe cup or a nice heel cup and all that kind of stuff, I again feel like there's just too much foam there. It's a little unnecessary. The midfoot is very comfortable, especially again, as I mentioned a second ago, with that Pro Lock system, really locks down the midfoot very nicely. Moving into the toe box, I enjoyed this. Yeah, there could be a little bit more room, but this is kind of one of the places that's fairly similar to the Kinvara. The thing that I'll add to that is that with the unnecessary amount of foam back here, my foot was a little bit pushed forward, and so it kind of fell into this area a little bit. Not a ton, it wasn't super uncomfortable, but it was something that I noticed here and there. Moving into the ride section, talking about this shoe, the first thing that I'll say is that on some really nasty stuff, this thing just stands out. It grips really well, and the angularity of all those lugs underneath really holds the ground very well. When I got onto buffed out terrain, it was really interesting because it certainly held the ground very well, but the question is, does it need to have all that grip? And probably not. Again, this is overkill for a lot of your more well-worn trails and things like that. Now, one thing that I should mention in this area is that the weight of this shoe in a men's size 9 is 11.2 ounces. It is very heavy. It didn't feel super dead, and again, I think that is largely credited to the kind of road-ish fit that it's got going on in it, but again, not a super lightweight shoe, so just be aware of that. As I mentioned several times in this review, this shoe is really good for what it's meant for, but on really smooth terrain, it's just probably a little bit much shoe, so consider that when you're buying it, especially when there's an option out there like the Saucony Peregrine, which is a lot more catering to both rugged terrain but also to more groomery type stuff. At $120, I actually think it's pretty well priced for what it is. I mean, this is a bomber shoe that can really handle some gnarly trail that's going to tear up a lot of the outsoles of some of its competitors. But what it comes down to is how much grip do you need? How much of those lugs do you need? I mean, look how nasty those things are in a good way. This shoe is really meant to grip some nasty stuff. So is it really going to be the right shoe for you? That's up to you. Before you go anywhere, hold on, please don't forget to like and favorite this video and subscribe to our channel by clicking this button right here. Now here's our question of the day. What type of trails do you run? Do you need a really toothy, nasty trail shoe, or can you handle something that's more of a hybrid shoe? Something like the Topo Athletic MT, or the MT2, which we're going to review here very soon. Let us hear it down in the comment section below. Guys, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with us today. If you've got any questions at all, don't hesitate to let us know, again, by leaving a comment or emailing info@gearist.com. As always, please feel free to follow us on all of our social media outlets. We'd love to hear from you, and we love to see your Ask Gearist questions, so please feel free to ask them. Guys, thanks again so much for spending a few minutes with us today, and we will see you next time.